Welcome to episode 238 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer-director Luke Sparke. He started off working as a costume designer on films and eventually was able to make the leap to writer-director. We talk about this transition as well as his latest feature film, Occupation, which is a sci-fi action flick about an alien invasion. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they are very much appreciated. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 238. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Again, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. A quick few words about what I'm working on. As mentioned over the last couple of weeks, I'm in the final stages of getting my crime thriller feature film, The Pinch, out into the world. Again, I want to just quickly mention our world premiere at Action on Film, which is in Las Vegas. The screening is going to take place on Wednesday, August 22nd at 10 p.m. in the Brendan Theater, which is located in the Palms Casino, which again is in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you live in the area and want to check out the film, please do. I will be there. So if you do come, please do say hello to me. I will link to the ticket information in the show notes. So just getting ready for the festival has taken up some time as there are a good number of deliverables I need to get them. I had to create a new version, full-size poster and mail that to them. You can see, actually, if you're on YouTube, you can see our new poster sitting behind me. That's the first printed version. It turned out what I think is really well, so then I've just had another version or another copy printed and then sent directly from the printer to the festival. I also have to get postcards printed up, just little postcards that basically promote the screening at the festival, and they're going to throw those postcards in sort of the goodie bags and just use them to promote our screening. I sent them a link to the film and they got that, and that's I think what they're going to use to actually screen the film is they actually download a high-res version of the film, but they also want a Blu-ray as a backup, and that's actually been more difficult than I thought. No one burns Blu-rays anymore, so it's actually been harder just finding someone who can do that for me, and then just figuring out what other things to attend at the festival. They have closing night banquets or award ceremonies. They have a bunch of other things that they run during the festival, and I've never been to this festival. I don't really know a lot about it, so I'm just trying to navigate those waters. If anyone has ever been to the Action on Film Festival, I'd be real curious to hear your thoughts about your experience, what you recommend, what things you think I should attend. So if you've been there and have some thoughts, please do send me an email, just info@sellingyourscreenplay.com. If you can't make the screening in Vegas but still want to see The Pinch, for a limited time it is available for sale on the website. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/thepinch. Again, the word The Pinch is all one word, all lowercase. I'm going to keep it for sale on the website for the next couple of weeks, and then I will be rolling it out to iTunes and Amazon after that. I'm going to try and get the release all set up to happen once the festival screening takes place, so it'll probably be late August or early September. I hopefully will have it up on iTunes and Amazon. So that's what I'm doing with The Pinch. I've talked about my teen comedy a number of times over the years. It's a script called Josh Taylor's Prom Date, and it actually went into production this past week. They're shooting half of it in Norway, and that's actually where they are right now. They're in Norway shooting, and then the other half of it is going to be shot, I think, in mid to late August in Pennsylvania. This isn't one that I did any producing on. I'm just the writer, so I don't have a lot of insight into the production, but I do think there is some interesting bits from my perspective as the screenwriter. So I'm going to get into those in a second. Now, what I'm about to relay is just my experience. This isn't me telling other people what they should do or how they should work their option agreements. It's really just telling you how this all went down. And I find it interesting to hear other people's stories of how they got their scripts optioned and ultimately produced. So that's what I like to share here. Again, though, this isn't advice. I'm not recommending anybody do it this way, but this is how this one went down. So my writing partner and I originally optioned this screenplay to the producer over 5 years ago. I don't even remember exactly when, but it was before I started the podcast. I remember when I first started talking with this producer, I lived in my old house, and I started this podcast about the time I moved to this current house. So I sort of remember when I was sitting in my office in my old house having these emails back and forth with this producer. So it's been well over 5 years I optioned it to him. He paid us a little bit for the option. Now, when I say a little bit, I think it was $1,000 or $2,000, and that was probably for like a 18-month or 2-year option. So not a huge amount of money, but he definitely kicked in a little bit of money, and I felt pretty good about it at the time because this was not a producer I knew or had any experience with. So just seeing some money like that gave me some confidence in him, in the sense that he had enough confidence in himself to get this thing produced that he was willing to shell out at least some money for the option. But then the option expired and he didn't want to spend any more money to renew it. Now, my writing partner and I, we liked him. We'd gotten to know him through email a little bit. Again, still, I had not met him. And this was not a script this was a script that we had written a long time ago, so we weren't really doing anything with it. So when the option expired, we emailed back and forth with him, and he seemed to want to continue on with the project. So we just basically let him. We said, yeah, no problem. Go ahead, continue on, and if something comes up on our end, we'll let you know. We were not promoting the script heavily. I would occasionally send it out when I saw a producer looking for a teen comedy, but for the most part, I was not making a real strong marketing push with this script because I knew he was kind of at least half-heartedly working on it. But I would also get updates from him every once in a while, and so I could tell that he genuinely was continuing to work on it. It was not like I would have radio silence for years on end. He would email me every once in a while some updates, and slowly things were chugging along. So again, me and my writing partner, we kind of just rolled the dice. The option was expired, but we kind of just told him, yeah, just keep working on it, and we'll honor this option agreement once you do want to produce it. So again, that's just kind of how it went down. And again, I'm just relaying this because, life is not always messy, and sometimes movie making is messy too. It just doesn't always go the way that a lawyer thinks that it should, or you might think it should as someone who hasn't been through this. If you've never been through this process of optioning and selling a script and seeing it get produced. I often get questions from new writers about whether they should give free options. And, my advice is generally speaking to give a free option, because I feel like just building a relationship with a producer and giving him sort of some leeway on a script is gonna take down at least a couple of hurdles for him to jump over. If he has to pay even a little bit of money, sometimes he just doesn't. The producers are scrappy and struggling as well, and sometimes they don't want to spend a lot of money on the options. So I'm a sort of a big proponent of giving free options. There's other things to consider, like the actual producer, if it's somebody you like. There's other things to consider, like if the person has a track record, if they've gotten things done before. But in general, I think I'm pretty aggressive with these option agreements that I sign, and I don't mind giving very, very low priced options or free options to certainly established producers. And this producer had done a good number of things. They were over in Norway, but he did have some track record. Now, the more important point that I think is specific to this project is that I don't think this film would have gotten produced if my writing partner and I had said, no, we're not going to give you additional time to work on this. You have to sign a new option and pay us another $1,000 or $2. I don't think he would have stuck with it. Maybe he would have renewed it one more time, but I don't think he would have stuck with it for 5 years. And I don't think people, especially as they're getting into this business as screenwriters, I don't think they often understand how long it's going to take for a producer to raise the money and get the project produced. Again, we're at the 5-year mark, or probably over the 5-year mark here, just with the option. So now they're going to go into production. I mean, there's a good chance he'll be in post-production for a year, 2 years, 3 years. it just takes a long time. Another script that I sold that took 10 years, a script that got produced called Rush Lights. It was a very similar type of a situation where I optioned the script, and he actually did keep the option going, and he did pay me a little bit for the 10 years, but it took him 10 years to raise the money. And then it took him another, I think 2 or 3 years to get through post-production because he had to raise some more money after that. So these things can just really take a long time. And again, if you're constantly at the producer's throat saying, I need another $500, another $1,000, another $2,000 for this option, I think eventually you're going to kill some of these option deals. So again, that's just my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth and think about your own situation. Maybe your circumstances are different. I feel like I'm a fairly prolific writer as well, so I never get in a situation where I feel like this one script is my masterpiece and this is my life. I always have a good number of scripts that are not optioned. So if a producer wants to option it, I've got other material that I can still continue to send out to other producers. So that's definitely also something that is part of the contributing factors to my decision to give these very generous option agreements out. Again, think about your own situation, but I relay this story to you. Hopefully it will be helpful to you. Now, in terms of how I originally met this producer, it was a film I optioned through my own email and fax blast service. The director producer, as I mentioned, he lives in Norway, so I didn't actually meet him until last year when he came to LA to do some casting for this project. So this was definitely just a cold submission. I'd never heard of him. He had never heard of me. He got the query letter. And in fact, if my memory is right, he actually read a horror comedy script. That's actually what I originally pitched through the email and fax blast. He read it, he liked it, but it wasn't something he thought he wanted to do. And so that's how the conversation started over the course of a few years. Or a couple of years anyways. We probably emailed back and forth, and eventually he was looking for something else. I emailed him this Josh Taylor's Prom Date, and that's the one he liked, and that's the one he ultimately optioned and now produced. So again, these things are not always like a one-to-one type of a thing where things go super smoothly. It took a while even to get him to option something of mine, and then obviously it's taken a while for him to raise the money and get into production. It's always exciting getting another movie into production, even if someone who has a few credits. Whenever I get a new credit, it feels like a miracle, and it really makes all the day in and day out slogging away, sitting by yourself, writing. It really makes it worth the effort. So I'm excited that this is going into production and going to get finished. And now I just cross my fingers and hope it turns out halfway decently. Anyway, so that's what I'm working on. Now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing writer-director Luke Sparke. Here is the interview. Welcome, Luke, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
That's all right. Thank you for having me. I've been following you for a long time, actually. So.
Oh, really?
Great.
Really? That's good to hear. So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up, and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
So obviously I'm in Australia, so okay. I'm lucky enough that my family it's in my sort of DNA. My family owns one of the largest military costume collections out here in the Southern Hemisphere for film, TV, entertainment business. So I sort of grew up behind the camera doing all the costumes, and I know it's a very different way to get into sort of where I am now, but I always took it as one big apprenticeship, and so we sort of hired costumes to films, and then eventually, when I was old enough, started working on set behind the camera, doing costumes on films like Wolverine and The Pacific with Steven Spielberg. And while I was there, I knew I wanted to end up where I am now, so I just took it as one big apprenticeship. I always tell people that if you want to be in the film industry, the best way to do it is hands-on and see it all happen in front of you, and that's what I did. So that's a little bit of a background of how I got started.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So how did you actually make the leap? So you're working in the costume department, helping on these productions, big productions. Were you also writing screenplays at the same time? And were you passing them to people that you were meeting? Maybe just take us through some of those steps, because there's a long way from being a costume designer to a writer-director of a feature film. And I just wonder if you can fill us in on some of those gaps.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. While I was working on those shows, I was very early on. I was obviously, like everyone does, do little short films and that back when I was very, very young. But once I was able to get on these bigger sets with people like directors and writers from HBO and Hugh Jackman and that, of course, I was trying to write features, and I was, lucky enough to be able to, not force myself, but obviously once I made a rapport with these, certain filmmakers, I could, ask their opinion or their advice, not give them the script, but at least, sort of pick their brain and have a back and forth, and, obviously read the rewrites as they're coming through HBO, or read the rewrites from, other films I was working on, to sort of see the whole process firsthand, and how it all works. And I directly applied that to obviously what I was trying to do. So again, it's just a great experience to be working in the film industry if that's what you love. So once I got through all that, I eventually decided that I had to make the leap. And I actually, it was one of those fortuitous moments where another production rang me up and said, we want you to, I think it was for a Russell Crowe movie, we want you to come and be the costume guy for Russell Crowe. And I had to say, look, I'm just about got my own first feature up. I have to stay on my career path of my feature films. I had to say no to that and make the leap into my first low budget feature film, which was a horror action film called Red Billabong.
Okay, and so maybe you can just give us a couple of quick points on how you actually got that you financed. So you wrote the script, and then did you have a number of contacts in the business to go out for? What was sort of the path to getting that script into production?
Yeah, so I spent sort of 6 years writing that film, and over that time, obviously, I was trying to make contacts as much as I could, and then once I decided to make that leap, I went back to my contacts in the investor world, and then a lot more sort of, they obviously talk to people, and they talk to people, and eventually, I got enough to at least, it was a very different sort of shoot. I sort of broke up the film into two pieces. So I shot sort of half the film, and then I went back to continue financing to go back and shoot the second half of the film. Just it was the only way I could get it done. It was a very different sort of circumstance. But once I had footage, then obviously people could watch the movie, sort of half the movie, and then come back and finance the second half. Very different way of doing it, and I obviously wouldn't do it again. But it was just what you have to do at the time.
Yeah, exactly. So let's dig into Occupation. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick logline or pitch for that film.
Okay, well, the pitch I did while I was in LA was basically an alien invasion movie told from the perspective of a small country town in Australia. Basically, Red Dawn, Independence Day smashed together was my very quick pitch. But using the Australian backdrop to kind of do something different with it and follow the lives of these very ordinary people rather than following military or presidents or computer analysts, just very ordinary people and how they're surviving through an alien occupation of Earth. Yeah,
I see. So where did this idea come from? Where was sort of the genesis of this story idea?
Right, so after Red Billabong, I was in LA selling Red Billabong around the world, and I had a couple of meetings with different financiers and investors over there, and I actually had a bunch of other scripts, a large war film, a comedy film. You know how it goes. You take in a bunch of different projects to try to pitch across different genres, and all of them were quite sort of reaching a bit higher than what the budget they thought that I could handle for a second film. And they said, sort of, what else do you have? These are all really good, but what else do you have? And the genesis of this idea had always been in the back of my head, growing up as a kid in the 80s, watching films like Predator, Independence Day, Aliens. I always look across the horizon and think, what if those lights were aliens coming to invade the Earth, and how would I react, and how would my neighbours react, and the guy down the local burger joint, how would he react, rather than the president? And so I literally just pitched the idea on the table and just said, Independence Day, Red Dawn, Australia smashed together, and they all looked at each other and said, that's pretty good. Where's the script? And I said, I will start writing that for you. And I walked out of the office, and my producer turned to me and she's like, what is this movie? What's happening now? What are we doing? And I'm like, it's okay. So on the plane ride back from LA, I started writing, and a couple months later, I turned in the first draft. And 6 months later, I was shooting. So it was a quick turnaround movie.
Yeah, no kidding. So I can see in your description of the film, you're constantly falling back on this thing where it's like the regular people, it's not the president, and this and that, the other thing. And I would imagine that was the first thing when I saw this trailer. It's the first thing. I mean, this is sort of a genre that's tried and true. Obviously, Independence Day, but Arrival, even Signs. I think Signs had some of what you're talking about, where it sort of investigated sort of the more normal, everyday people as aliens invade. So, how do you go and give it that spin? Were there some other things? I mean, obviously, you've tried to give it a little bit of a unique angle in sort of your premise, but were there some other things that you also tried to do that were unique and that really separated it from Independence Day and those types of films?
Yeah. I mean, it is hard with this sort of film. Obviously, it is a very tried and true genre. Luckily, down under here in Australia, there's never been an alien invasion movie filmed in Australia. So obviously, for Australians, that's a unique angle going into the market out here. For the world, you know, it's apart from, like you said, Signs and that, and making that unique angle. Once I got into the script, I really wanted to sort of make sure that the storyline with the aliens were just a little bit different. You know, obviously we've seen Independence Day rocking up and just having mass destruction weapons and being able to wipe out cities. I just sort of tried to get the genesis of the aliens just to be a little bit different, where their backstory is a bit more sort of, I won't say realistic, but something that could be in between sort of District 9 and Independence Day, where they're not refugees, but they're not coming here with weapons of hugely mass destruction that can wipe us all out. It's much more of a ground invasion, much more of a. I'm a huge fan of history, obviously working in military shows, so I try to inject a sort of try to do a realistic sort of map out of a ground invasion and how, you know, the Earth would fight back and how ordinary people would fight back, and sort of bring in the World War I, World War II sort of style of you know, combat warfare in the rain and in the mud, and towards the end of the movie of how a movie like this could end, rather than just having you know, blue beam in the sky or pressing a button and all the battle droids turn off, and sort of looking back on history of how I could bring history into this movie in a realistic way, looking back on World War I and how that finished, rather than, you know, a complete annihilation. It was like a truce, a handshake. I thought that was very interesting. That hasn't been seen in an alien movie, I don't think, too much. So I sort of tried to inject all of that into the script.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I wonder too, and just in watching the trailer for Red Billabong and for Occupation, I noticed that there's a lot of uniforms, military uniforms, and this kind of thing. And I wonder, is your writing sort of impacted by your background in costuming? Because it seems like for low-budget scripts, you try to avoid some of these bigger scenes that take a lot of costume and production value and stuff. But since you have that background, maybe that sort of stuff doesn't scare you. But maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Just specifically, how did your costuming work affect your writing? Yeah,
I mean, look, you know, they always say you gotta write from what you know, and that's, you know, as you said, that doesn't scare me at all. It's exactly what I know, and I'm lucky enough to have that background and have the sort of my family business there behind me. So obviously, when I write, you know, like I said, fan of history, fan of uniforms, fan of that. So it does creep in. Actually, Red Billabong, I went out and said to myself, I don't want to try to lean on that. I want to, even though there's a few military uniforms in that, it's much more of a, you know, ordinary story with you know, set in the outback with kids and you know, sort of very modern and that with their costumes and that. But going into Occupation, I said, screw it. I'm gonna lean on what I know a lot more, and I know I have the facilities and the contacts to make bigger scenes happen that as Jesse just said, you know, bigger things happen that other people can't. So I should lean on that because that's something that I actually know, and I feel completely comfortable in shooting action sequences with military in trenches or the mud or all that kind of stuff. So yes, yeah, moving forward, I'll continue to lean on that because it's something that I absolutely know, and it's not just that I know it; it's kind of in my DNA. Yeah. I love it. So. Yeah.
In these short films that you did, was there a lot of action scenes in those? Like, I wonder, as you're presenting this project, hey, I want to direct this, did you have some similar action scenes that you could point to that you've directed before?
Yeah, in my short films, I think it's always been, back in the day, I think my first short film was like 2001 or something, when I was a teenager, just out of high school. And it was a World War II sort of, it was like a World War II movie about Americans and Germans. Like, of course, that's the one you go to, because growing up watching Patton and Saving Private Ryan. So that was my first one. And then just before I did go Bill Bond, I actually shot 2 episodes of a Australian History Channel production of World War One and World War Two, in like trench warfare, and in the jungles of New Guinea and that. So I was able to obviously have that in my repertoire to sort of say I can do this, and I sort of applied a lot of stuff that I worked on the Pacific in those sort of documentary episodes. I got the same crew, the Australian crew that worked on the Pacific, and sort of I was able to bring over the first AD and script supervisor and the stunt coordinator, and sort of bring them all over who I worked with on all these bigger war films, and sort of apply them to my show, and sort of sit around and say, remember that day on the Pacific we did it like this, let's do that here. And it kind of really works. So
yeah. Okay, so let's talk about your writing process a little bit. Where do you typically write when you're writing your scripts?
I typically write at home. I have a house at the back of the Gold Coast out here in Queensland, and very nice mountain views. And I have my office and my sort of rooms filled with movie memorabilia, and I'm a huge collector of movie memorabilia, Star Wars collector going way back. So I have all that stuff surrounding me, which I feel inspires me a little bit when I'm writing these genre pictures, which is what I want to keep writing. So that's where I write normally.
What does your day look like when you're working on a screenplay? Do you write? Are you the type of writer that writes for 16 hours a day for a week or two to get that draft out? Are you someone that writes a few pages every day? What does your writing schedule look like?
I would love to say that I'd be the guy that writes 16 hours a day, but usually, especially since the last couple of years when I've been doing multiple things at once, I usually write a couple of pages a day over the course of a fair while. But when I can, I love to be the writer that just sits there with the door closed for 16 hours and just punches out a whole bunch of if not the whole draft, or at least a whole bunch of an action scene, or a whole sequence, or a whole first act or something. I sort of alternate between what I'm doing.
Yeah. And how much time do you spend preparing to write versus actually opening up the outline? And it's usually a matter of like outlining and index cards and character development, that sort of stuff, and then opening up final draft. What is the ratio for you?
Pretty low with that first preparation stuff. For my first draft, at least, I usually spend maybe 2 weeks doing the index cards and the character development, and then I kind of just go, I'm just going to dive in till at least the first draft, and just get going.
And so you got 2 weeks of the outlining preparation. Then how long does it take you once you're writing to write? If you're doing even 2 or 3 pages a day, is that a 5-day week? So then just multiply that out by whatever, 10 weeks.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
I would say so. I don't really I haven't really kept track of my first few scripts like that. I don't really think about it at the time. Looking back on it now, it's funny to look back. But yes, at the time, especially coming back to Occupation from America, I was like literally writing index cards on the plane on the way back, and sort of like an outline of what I wanted to see in this movie. And then I got back and I just got into it.
Yeah. How do you know when your script is ready to show to others? Is there a certain point where you just feel like you've gone as far as you can without getting feedback? But what is that moment for you when you realize it's time to start getting feedback?
Yeah, I would probably say that the time for me is when I get to the point that I feel in my gut that at least the bare bones of the script works. And I do feel like I need feedback, and it's just a gut feeling for me. I probably should go over it a little bit more, but I feel like if I I just don't want to get too attached to it. And then I have a core team within my business of my producers and people that I trust, that I give out the script to first, who I know are going to be pretty honest with me, but also understand my sort of creativity of where I'm coming from with the certain movie that we're working on. And I give that to them for feedback, and then I do another couple of drafts before I give it out to anyone remotely professional or in the biz.
hmm And how do you approach screenplay structure? Blake Snyder, Sid Field, very much sort of the typical three acts. I know a lot of writers are maybe more freeform. Where do you fall on sort of the structure, the three act structure, or not to worry about the three act structure?
For a long time, I was kind of, I was like, don't worry about the 3-act structure. But once I got into the writing occupation, I actually really did focus on the 3-act structure, and I really, really enjoyed honing myself to that. So it's something that I'll probably continue on with my next one and continue on again and see where that goes. But, I feel that it really worked for occupation. I can see it also really helping in the edit of the film when people were going off the 3 acts of the script. You can really feel it in the movie, the 3 acts, and people commented on it when they watched it at the damn screenings. So I'm actually kind of like, I'm a bit converted now to the 3 act structure.
Yeah. So you just mentioned a moment ago that once you're done a script, you can start sending it out to some members, producers, and such that are on your team. Maybe you can talk about some of the criticism that you got back and kind of how you handled that. I'm always just curious to hear some of the specific elements, that maybe you needed to change or just how it all went down.
Well, obviously everyone's different, right? Every script's different. I'm obviously in the realms of the genre picture, growing up in the 80s, and that's kind of where I always fall back on. Criticism is always a funny thing with people, right? I've seen it go well, I've seen it go really bad. I've seen people lose it over being criticized and literally throw people out. My mantra again, this comes back to me working behind the scenes in the film industry. My mantra is always be collaborative. So you sort of I have to do like calming exercises before I sit down with my producers to talk about the criticism, because I just know that if I don't, I can fall back on that age-old adage of getting really annoyed and being like, this is my movie, why aren't you listening to me? Why are you criticizing me? So I do calming exercises before I would go in and just open myself to listen to the criticism and then be collaborative of how to fix it. For me, being a genre person, I think a lot of the criticisms come back where I want to throw in maybe too many one-liners, too many action one-liners like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Bruce Willis. In my first couple of drafts, I always find that I start, this is cool, and I write this because it's cool, cool. And then my guy's always the first one to come back and go, well, hang on, like that's, we really like the story and these characters are really awesome. Why are you ruining it with these one-liners? Why are you ruining it being cheesy? You don't need to be cheesy with it. And I'm like, okay. So then I go back, and that's where I get my sort of second wind of going, well, let's focus on the history aspect. Let's bring some history into it rather than trying to be a cool action movie, because that's just, that word is great, but it's superficial. So that's where I find that my criticisms come from a lot. Like I said, my action sequences, my sort of big set pieces always go very well over with people. That's kind of how I can really pitch well of these action sort of grand sequences. So I always find my criticisms come from trying to be 1980s movies too much, even though I love them.
Yeah. So you mentioned right when we started talking about occupation that you basically had pitched it to a company, and then they said, we like that, and you went off to write the script. Did that all come to fruition? Did they give you some money to write the script, or did they wait for the script to come back, and then ultimately did they end up producing the movie? Was that your path to production for Occupation?
A little bit. They didn't give me money to write it. You always got to do that yourself, I find so far. So no, I came back and I sat down and do it all myself. Those guys did come on board as part finances in the end, which was great. So that obviously got me kickstarted, and then I filled the gap over here with a couple of other very high net worth people that loved Red Billabong. So it was great to obviously have one under my belt to steamroll onto the next one. And then off those, I was able to get a sales agent in America, Film Mode Entertainment, Clay Epstein, who's just fantastic. I can't speak highly enough of him. And I always find both Red Billabong and this one, going to get a sales agent to me is like really, really important. And I've had good experiences both times I've done it, because again, then they come in, they give you feedback on what they think the script is sales-wise, internationally-wise, buyer-wise. And I was actually on set filming Occupation, and they were at the Cannes Film Market, and Clay rang me up and said, buyers in Germany and all these other places, they really like it. They think the ending's just, needs a bit more in the ending to be the climax. And I was like, literally filming the climax. And I was like, okay, thanks for that. And then we ended up finding some extra money and, doing this whole helicopter airborne attack, fighting alien spaceships and stuff that wasn't even in the script. And I was just making it up as I was going by the seat of my pants on the days on set, scribbling things on my script going, now we'll have the commanders do this and we'll have the aliens do this. And it all came together in the end. And, I was actually really happy to have their sort of advice while we were shooting. It was really good.
And what were these guys? So Clay is showing these potential film buyers. Is he showing them the script? Is he showing them, like, how did they even know that the ending needed to be beefed up a little bit? Just because they were reading the script?
Yes. Yep. At that time, they were reading just the script.
Okay.
He was passing the scripts around, and yep.
Okay, perfect. I mean, I'm curious, how important is cast to a film like this? You had a good cast in this, but I wouldn't say that there's any name cast. And it feels like a film like this is more about sort of the action and the effects, not so much getting name talent. Would you agree with that? Does it seem like these kinds of films can be made without some cast? You don't need the Bruce Willis or the Nicolas Cage to actually get these movies made and potentially pull a profit?
Yeah. God, I hope so, because casting is, like, as everyone probably knows, is the chicken before the egg catch-22 situation all the time. It's the big thing that holds everything up. But yeah, look, eventually, and the other scripts that I took to America before I came up with this one had that same conundrum. They're all sort of cast-based. They were like, an action film like Taken, we need that one lead, and can't start that movie without that one lead because he's going to sell the movie for you. And that's why it was a bit refreshing to sort of just jump back over to this, make a sort of ensemble cast alien invasion where, as you said, I felt like the action and the set pieces became a bit more of a star than the cast. So for me, I was kind of like, oh, thank God, I can get this movie done and not have to worry about these names. And while, as you said, yes, this is a great cast, there is no really an international name. I guess Temuera Morrison's probably my biggest one internationally. And he was great to come on board for us. So yeah, this one I wanted to focus more on, obviously the trailers are a lot more focused on explosions and aliens and helicopters rather than a particular cast member. And I think so far it's worked for us, which is good.
Yeah.
And I feel relieved because, God, casting is obviously the biggest challenge everyone's going to face.
Yeah, and I'm curious, is it specifically sort of this ensemble action sci-fi genre? I interviewed Ryan Belgart. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he did a movie called The Jurassic Games, and I had him on a few weeks ago on the podcast, and I would say his film was very similar. It's called Jurassic Games, so needless to say, there's dinosaurs in it, so they sort of become the star. And again, had a good cast, but not name cast. Do you think this is a trend? Some of these independent distributors are understanding that they can still sell these films, these types of films without cast? Or has it always been like this, and maybe I just haven't noticed it?
Look, I hope it's the former of what you said. I think audiences, I think there's a huge disconnect between sales agents and audiences. For one, I think audiences will show up at these sort of movies that aren't obviously cast based, but much more genre and the set pieces and the whole thing based. I think sales agents are still living in the past. And I think the buyers are as well.
Yeah.
I hope, and I hope that can change. And I agree with you.
Yeah. So I noticed on IMDb, you've already got the Occupation 2, the sequel listed. Is that something in motion? Are you waiting to see how successful this film is before you start that one, or have you already got that one ready to go?
No, it's we're actually, next week is our first week of pre-production on the sequel. And we shoot it in end of August through to October. So going off the international sales that we've sold this movie all around the world. Obviously, it opens in America July 20th, and that after Australia this week. I think tonight's my red carpet premiere out here in Sydney for the film. Off all the sales between that and some tax rebates that we got. The film was, this is the first film's already made its money back. So everyone wants to continue on with the sequel. I was actually in America at the AFM last year when we sold this movie to a bunch of territories, and we all stood around and shook hands on making a sequel. So since November till now, I've been working on the screenplay of the sequel, and we go in production and we do it.
Perfect. So how can people see Occupation? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like?
I don't know the specifics, but I know July 20th, the AMC theatre chain over there is doing a rollout across the country of it. And I think it's a day and date, same day as VOD over there as well. But I hope people seek out the AMC theatres because it's really great sound that in this movie. So you kind of need to see it and hear it on the big screen.
Okay. Perfect. And what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Twitter, Facebook, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing, I'll round up and put in the show notes.
Yeah, my Twitter and my official Facebook page. I'm always on there giving advice and talking to people and that. So that's the best way to keep up with me and Occupation,
and that's your name,
both
Luke,
the sequel and the franchise in general.
Okay, and it's just Luke Sparke is your Twitter handle?
Yeah, it's just my name. It's just at Luke Sparke and Luke Sparke official on Facebook.
Okay, perfect. I will round all that.
And the occupation page on Facebook is a great way to keep up with the Occupation franchise as well.
Oh, okay, perfect. Luke, I really appreciate you coming on and talking with me today. Good luck with this film and good luck with Occupation 2.
All right, thank you very much.
Perfect. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline and synopsis writing service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your screenplay gets a recommend or a consider from one of our readers, you get to list the screenplay in the SYS Select database, which is a database for producers to find screenplays and a big part of our SYS Select program. Producers are in the database searching for material on a daily basis, so it's another great way to get your material in front of them. As a further bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one of our readers, your screenplay will get included in our monthly Best Of newsletter. Each month we send out a newsletter that highlights the best screenplays that have come through our script analysis service. This is a monthly newsletter that goes out to our list of over 400 producers who are actively looking for material. So again, this is another great way to get your material out there. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Michael DeBliss. He's an attorney who does a lot of work with screenwriters and filmmakers. We dig into option agreements, NDAs, and a number of other legal issues that screenwriters might face. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. That's the show. Thanks for listening.